Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to February 2021 second Coffee of the Architect for meeting for this year. We're excited, obviously, to have a gentleman who absolutely needs no introduction, Mr. Ed Vance, but I'll give him a little bit of an introduction anyways for those of you who maybe don't know him. But before I do that, I had the privilege, and I do want to acknowledge right now, I had the privilege of attending the virtual attending of Randy's retirement on Saturday, to which Mr. Ed Vance was the MC for. And I just want to say, wow, what a great virtual meeting. Hearing from all the past presidents and listening to what they had to say about Randy was just something that I think was priceless in and in itself. And I wanted to thank you, Ed, for just providing such a great MC for that event. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was took you down memory lane. I've only been here 2 years, but I learned a lot about how much this particular individual meant to the organization. So I know she's off enjoying her retirement, but she's here in spirit. So with that, thank you again, Ed. And Ed, for those of you who don't know him, which if you don't, you're living underneath a rock. So welcome to planet Earth. Ed has been a staple of Las Vegas since Las Vegas, I think, changed its name to Las Vegas. And so he comes by way of being a very active designer in many shapes and fashions for what is, and what will be important to the design community. And so, it's exciting to have him as our speaker today. I don't want to read his bio. You guys can go to his website and read his bio, but I do want to bring up one thing on how I met Ed, and I never forgot it. And to this day, my relationship with him has continually increased because of this single moment in time. And that moment in time was with the AIA product show 2 years ago, when we had basically the speed dating lunch thing with the different designers, and which this particular Coffee with an Architect is a takeoff of. And Ed, I was sitting in front of Ed, and he was the second person that I sat in front of that day, and he didn't have a pen. So I had a pen. I said, "You could have my pen." And so he kept the pen. He goes, "Thanks, I'll keep the pen." And I opened up the conversation that way and found out that he was actually a product of North Dakota State University. And so the interesting part of that is that my father was in the Air Force, and I grew up in Minot, North Dakota. And not many people even know where Minot is, but Ed did. And so that was kind of the entry point into me getting to know more about him and his organization. But if you don't know where Minot is, don't worry about it, because you could stand there and see nothing for about 100 miles, no matter which way you turn. And with that, Ed, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Coffee with the Architect, sir. Thank you for being here. I'll open it up just for you to say anything you want to say, and then we'll open it up to everybody else to start blasting you with a bunch of intriguing questions, as I know that they have.
Well, thank you, Lee. That's fantastic. And thanks for having me. This is, I think we had Eric Roberts was our first victim of this program. And I understand he did a fantastic job. And from what he tells me, he just opened it up. And I think these meetings are best when people are asking good questions and I can rattle off. And there is no script, by the way. So I see Randy signed in. So you can't tell me I have to stick to the script, because there is none.
Hey.
I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. And so I am just pleased to be here and answer any questions after having been in town for, I have to do the math here, 1895, I think I arrived.
1895.
Yeah, no, 1987. So it's been 34 years now. And it's been a fantastic ride. And the Institute, by its very nature, is responsible, and my association with it has been a big part of my success. I don't think I could have risen to the heights and the lengths I have had it not been for the Institute and my involvement with it and the fantastic people in it. And that includes Randy, who I can't say enough about, by the way, and Kelly. So I'm not going to sit here and profundicate. I'm just going to open this up to people that want to ask any darn question they might of me, and I'm happy to answer and pontificate as best I can. So how does this work? They raise their hands, Lee, you let them in?
They could raise their hand. I'm monitoring the chat box. They can go ahead and ask a question. I certainly have questions that could start the conversation off. So I will go ahead and start by asking you, Ed, everybody's wondering what 2021 the projection is looking from a designer's perspective, right? What does the economic conditions for Las Vegas look like, as everyone was so happy to leave 2020 in the rearview mirror? So as you look in your glass ball, so to speak, with the mass wisdom of your many years of being in Las Vegas, how do you foresee Las Vegas pulling out of the, let's call it towards the end of the current pandemic? And what from your perspective, does a post-pandemic look like from a designer's perspective?
Well, and that's a great question. From a designer standpoint, I would change that to, an architect standpoint, and an architect as a businessman. If you're all running your practices, you're all trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the economy. With the changes that we've seen recently in the political scene, which will affect the economy, we're all anxious to see how it's all going to turn out. We're seeing an uptick in business and inquiries from our private sector, and as everyone should know, we do the bulk of our work is private work. So we keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the private sector from the developer side. So the public side is another animal that I don't play in. So, but I think they follow suit relative to how the private sector works. But we're seeing the markets are doing very well, so we're actually we've actually hired a few folks. So we've been very fortunate on that. We see the markets in office are actually hard to believe. There's a rise in the number of office buildings we're starting to experience. Multifamily is still cooking like with gas. We're moving into another market in terms of that space. We're looking at 2 projects down in Phoenix now. So I think that's a product of a lot of the young folks not wanting to commit, so they don't want to buy a house, and it's getting more and more difficult to buy them, and there's a shortage of them. You've seen housing prices skyrocket recently. So we're seeing an uptick in work, and I think we're all going to experience that. And that's a snowball effect. When we're busy, obviously the contractors follow, and the suppliers, and all of the other folks. So we're optimistic, and I think that this year could do very well. A lot depends on this big bill. I think some of this spending that we're doing at the federal level could come back and bite us in the butt. So we have to be cautious about how we see that working. But so far, I think I'm anticipating a good next couple of quarters. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody on this call is appreciative of the fact that that's a positive versus a negative.
Yeah.
We have our first question from Robert Bess, who asked, question regarding virtual work and technology in general.
Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of get your take on one. We've all, over the last year, learned to work from various places, and I personally think it's a good thing. And then part 2 of that question, taking on technology, is what do you see as far as technology platforms impacting our work this year?
Oh boy, well, there's a lot there to unpack. I mean, certainly, we all had to learn to work virtually as best we could. The technology has been, I think, struggling to keep up. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been involved in doing these virtual meetings, and it crashes or whatever, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. This one's working out pretty well right now, so I'm grateful for that. Personally, I had a tough time doing what we do as designers virtually. It was an absolute struggle. I draw, so I'm kind of old-fashioned. So the interchange of ideas and the exchange of thoughts and emotions, and architecture is full of all those criteria. It was so difficult through a laptop. It was struggling. So we developed a way to readjust our office. So we've been working in our office. We allowed people to work from home if they so desired. I still have some folks working from home, but a lot of us wanted to come back. So we just practiced social distancing. Our office is large enough to hold 30 people, and we're only 19. So we spread everybody around. When we get together, we social distance, but we can still exchange those ideas and get the work done. We did experience a drop in productivity and efficiency through through that time when we were all home. And so everybody had to handle it differently. We've been fortunate so far, and we're seeing the numbers drop, and we're anxious for the rest of the world to get back to some semblance of normality. But I will tell you, in my personal opinion, this is in the last pandemic you're going to have. We're going to see the change in how we conduct business, how we do design buildings, how mechanical engineers in the group. I'm sure you're going to start seeing code changes coming up. HEPA filters are going to be required in all assembly buildings. That's my guess. And how we detail our buildings, from touchless faucets to touchless elevators, all of those things will happen just because this isn't the last one. And it wasn't the first. We've had plenty of them. So just dealing with that in our business has been a real challenge. And I've talked to a lot of my colleagues across the country, and they've all struggled with it as well. It hasn't been easy. One of my friends said it was tough for to keep my folks busy at work and concentrating on their work because they're on their phone all the time. And it's like, and when they were home, I couldn't watch them, right? So it was even more difficult. So I think we're wired for connectivity and being together. And so as biological entities, that's just our nature. And so that's been torn from us. And I swear that's affected all of us, and not in a positive way. I think a lot of the introverts are having fun at home, but the extroverts, and we outnumber introverts 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, if I'm not mistaken. And so we like to, we like to be together with others. And so we just have to learn to do that a little better and responsibly. But back to your question, how do we work in all of this? It's been a challenge to do. I think a lot of the production elements of what we do, because there's always 2 sides of the house, right? The design side and the production side. I think our production folks did great. There was no problem there. These get the project designed, and all your job is now put the working documents together, coordinate with the consultants, and produce the documents. But from the design side, meeting with my clients, reading their eyes, their emotions, their wants and desires, that was a challenge. So we do conduct meetings safely in our office. I got a big conference room, but I can read them, I can talk to them. And people aren't checking out on these virtual things if they're in the office, and they're not talking over each other. So that's the challenge we've had. But I think we've learned to work with it here. And I know others have as well. And I'm hoping everybody, in the next 3, 4, 5 months, as all of these vaccines are finally getting into people's arms, and I encourage everybody to get vaccinated. The technology is not the old-fashioned one where they give you an old virus and hopefully it works and you have all kinds of side effects. That's not the way it's working. This is the messenger RNA, new technology, new biology. It's the thing of the future, and we're going to see better technology coming out relative to that in the future as well, not only for vaccinations, but also for therapeutics. I don't mean to get into biology and stuff, but as architects, don't we connect with, we have to know just about everything about everything. There's something about it all, because it all connects to what we do, right? Because we're designing buildings that not only house people, but also protect them and keep them out of harm's way. And so we need to know about everything that we can get our hands on. You can't read enough, you can't learn enough, you can't talk to enough people, right? Because that makes us better architects in the long run. Next question. I could run on that forever.
Thank you.
That's so good. It's as if we have our own little AI aide, Dr. Fauci, in our midst, giving us the Las Vegas CDC guidelines. I love it. Get vaccinated. Thanks, Ed. Next question is from John. And John, Once you go and ask your question, but before you ask your question, this is a great topic I wanted to bring up because, Ed, if you think back to our prep meeting last week, there was one thing I wanted to bring up in this meeting, and this is about that right there. So John, your question is?
So Ed, my question, and you kind of answered it a little bit in what you were just saying, is as far as how to best connect with you and your staff, during this this time for us being, remote and distancing. But you sort of answered the question. It sounds like you've opened your office up. I'm assuming outside vendors, product reps, such as myself.
Right.
Are we in that group?
We you know what, we played by ear. We had a furniture supplier come in because we do interiors as well, and we had them come over and they set up in our parking lot. And of course, we're on the first floor, so all our staff walked out. We had our masks on. We viewed all their products. They were able to talk to us, and we're outside. And of course, the science tells us that the chance of catching this darn thing outside is virtually nil. And and that was several weeks ago, and that's proven to be true. So I tell everybody, just put your common sense hat on and do your best. We've all heard enough to make up our own damn minds to do what we think is right for our staff and the people we affiliate with. As long as it's a small gathering and our folks can gather in a reasonable place, we're open to the idea. But we a lot of times our consultants are coming in. We'll still do a virtual product show. They'll send lunch over. I make sure everybody's at their desks, watching and eating because they paid for your lunch. So listen to what the hell they're saying. So, so we're doing a little bit of both. Okay. But as the numbers keep dropping, John, we're going to open up even more. So we're just, it's called a gradual adjustment, and you'll be back in the office shortly. How's that sound?
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
You bet.
So, John, that brings a whole new meaning to the word drive-through. So bring your lunch, drive through the parking lot. You can set up with the lunch in it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, great response, Ed. I appreciate it. That was John, that was the comment that I was referring to Ed in regards to last week when he told me about the lunch and learn in the parking lot. I said, that is the first time I've heard somebody say they had a lunch and learn in the parking lot.
Well, it wasn't my idea. That was, what, that's some of our vendors. They're thinking ahead too. They're going,
yeah, that's great.
And we're going to listen to them, and we're going to consider options like that because that's what we do. We've got a great constraint analysis, and just like a good design project, we figure it out.
Well, you said something there, Ed, that as a vendor myself, and I could appreciate the people on here also appreciate that comment. From a vendor perspective, when you said, hey, they bought your lunch, you better make sure you listen to them. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of us for telling your team as a leader of your team to say, hey, give these guys a chance to listen to what they want to say. Having said that, Marcia has the next question. Marcia, you want to ask your question?
Well, you kind of answered it. I was just wondering if you were going to go back to lunch and learns, which now you've touched upon. But I guess I have another question is, if you do virtual lunch and learns, are those effective for you and your group? Do you find that to be helpful, or is in-person ones better?
That's an easy answer. If you look up the definition of virtual, what is it? I'll tell you, because I looked it up. It's almost or near. So to me, that's not as good as the actual thing. So the answer is no, it's not nearly as good. I get more out of a person talking directly to them. Again, body motions, eye movement, just body language. I learn so much more that way, and I can and just knowing that that person's we're engaged on a one-on-one with other people in the room. They know not to jump in and talk over one another. So to me, that's just the best way. I'm sorry, that's how we conducted business for thousands and thousands of years. So that there's no substitute for it. This is pretty darn close. Granted, we couldn't have Chris Barker here because he's in Texas. I'm sure he wouldn't have driven over to the AA offices just to be part of this. But as we develop this technology, it's going to help us do, I think, combinations of the two. Think about it. We could have been in a big room with all of you asking good questions and really kind of kibitzing between each other. And then Chris could have possibly logged in and been on a monitor and we could see him. And so you can do these things in hybrid sorts of fashions. This methodology we're seeing here isn't going to go away. We're seeing quick meetings that we see are just fine with this venue, with this methodology. So if I had a quick meeting over in Henderson and I just needed a couple of answers and ask a couple of questions, we could have done that and saved all that gas driving to another part of the town. But when it comes to the real meat of meeting with someone to gather the critical criteria necessary to design a building, this gets back to the first or second question we got. It's absolutely essential to be with your client in person. I swear to God, so you got to pick and choose, right? And I think this technology is allowing us to do both. And so it's just giving it another option. So use your common sense, use your best judgment. It's not black and white, all right?
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Next question is from Chris. Chris?
Actually, I appreciate your perspective on working remotely. And I've attended a similar webinar amongst engineers, civil engineers, structural engineers.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, we're thinking, yeah, there's a real advantage. We can attend these meetings remotely, and we can even learn how to draw on the computer with our mouse. Although I'm by the ways to go on that. Either that, or I got to back off from the coffee a little bit. But the comment that I heard from the engineers too was that the productivity tails off, and the senior guys seem to have no problem with it. But what happens is the junior guys that you rely on to really help out, it's tough because they don't have a good avenue to ask questions and be involved in the trenches of it. One of the immediate impacts of the COVID was one of our our office projects shut down, and I think 4 of this gentleman's sales in this office project that he had fell out. And you had mentioned the office market a little bit earlier. What do you see in more detail regarding specifically the office market? As far as the impact of COVID on that.
Right. No, sure. There, we're finishing up Credit One. Oddly enough, right now it's 160,000 square foot bank building, and they had the option to shut down, and they didn't. They see business going forward, and we're going to get over this hump. We didn't modify too much because we kind of designed the building with all of the proper ventilation systems and the newest technologies. So they were all over that. We're going forward with another project in the Las Vegas Tech Center, which is an office building. But what we're seeing is some of the changes in programming are a lot more hospitality stations, not office settings. So we get a lot more people that are kind of working from home and then working in the office to get those kinds of connectivity and it's something Tony Shea talked about, that those collision issues, the collision benefits you get when you run into somebody and exchange ideas that you didn't plan on, that you can't get virtually. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. You're going to bump into somebody virtually. You're going to bump into them at the water cooler or the coffee machine. Right. And it's like, you know what? That's a great idea. Do you see what I mean? Absolutely. So those kinds of things, I think people that are running businesses realize that sort of intangible event is something you can't ignore or forget. So, I mean, the Uncommons is moving forward with a lot of new office buildings over there. Jim Stewart sees past all of this, and knows that ultimately businesses have to. I mean, I think we're getting really tired of working from home. I got some of my staff were going, halfway through this thing, they're going, "Can I come into work?" And I go, "Sure, if you feel safe and comfortable, we're going to practice." We had the place, fumigated and clean beyond belief.
Right.
And I said, "Well, why is it this?" Like, well, I live with my mom and my grandmother, and they won't leave me alone. Mm-hmm. So I know you're all laughing at that because I can't hear you, but the point is that it was a situation where, can you come help me in the kitchen or whatever? It's like they couldn't get their work done. So sometimes you need to go somewhere and really get your job done so you can concentrate and do your work. So, as much as you can, you can start to see these things kind of piling up a little bit, and they can. But back to your question, how is the office working, and where's that market sector going? I think it's going to be fine. I really do. I think the very reason we did them in the first place, the rationale for how we did business, is going to be realized very quickly. There's a good reason why we did it that way.
Yes.
And for all those reasons I just mentioned. So I'd say, buckle up. It's going to be back.
Good. Very positive.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ed. John, you want to ask your question?
Sure. So Ed, good to see you again.
Yes. Hi, John.
Hey. So my question's kind of from a high level. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience both on and off strip. A lot of the stuff you've mentioned so far is, office buildings, multifamily things, more off the strip. You started to see where that's starting to tilt back to backfilling some of those openings on the strip, and I guess the second part of that question is, for the stuff on the strip, is it a willingness for the owner to really commit to spending the money, or just exploring ideas right now?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I don't have my finger on the pulse of the hospitality market as well as I do on these other markets. It's not that we don't practice in that sector. We certainly do. But I know what I read, and the original purchasers of the Fontainebleau just bought it back. So they're obviously seeing something. They're going to finish that project up, God willing, this time. And we're on the, we have a small role on the Resorts World project. They haven't slowed down. They're committed to finishing that project as well. There's a number of other projects I've seen that are spinning off because of that. So I think the on-strip stuff, I think it's going to be back. I think they're the 800-pound gorilla in our economy. So they've been allowed to open a little more than some of the others, which is kind of angering others, in other businesses, because they have such a, they've got a bigger voice. So we're seeing the opening of those, and once they do, and travel comes back, we're going to be positioned just as we always have. Vegas has always, rebounded. We tank fast and we rebound fast. I mean, we are the embodiment of a roller coaster. I'm sorry, and so you've got to have a shoulder harness, not just a safety belt here, and basically, take some Dramamine, because here we go. I think that over the next 2-3 quarters, again, we're going to be, hang on, it's going to be fun. And I think it's going to, all market sectors are going up. I really do.
Definitely positive trajectory moving forward. Which is...
and let me just say, there is so much money in the economy right now that hasn't been spent. Yeah. Savings are way up for everyone. The minute they're going to be allowed to go spend it, hang on.
The pent-up demand.
It really is, and they're going to be overspending. So
yeah, there'll be a net.
Right, we're a consumer-driven economy, and when people start consuming again, and what that means for us as architects and engineers and vendors, the other vendors in the crowd, we're going to be playing catch up too, because we're going to be looking for people. It'll be an employer or an employee market again. So. Yeah, for those of you,
all signs are positive.
Group here, you have jobs. It's going to be good.
So I hope I don't say this gentleman's name incorrectly, but Mahesh has an incredible question that I'm sure is on a lot of people's mind. Mahesh, go ahead.
Thank you, Lee, and I apologize for correcting you. It is Mahesh.
Yes, I should have went with that.
That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Ed, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So my question was around just the employee culture. Like, as a business owner, How do you find balance between the employees that want to work virtually and as a business owner knowing the fact that their productivity is impacted when they're working virtually?
Right.
Like, how do you find balance in that? And are you seeing, as you mentioned, your office has grown, are you seeing that employees, that's what they look for now in employers, giving them the flexibility?
I'm not saying that request from certain employees out there in the marketplace isn't there. I'm sure they're asking for it. I haven't heard much of that. Most of the employees that have come through, they're perfectly happy to work here. The balance is they have the option. We don't mandate they come in. We don't mandate that they go home. We give them their liberties. So it's up to them. I think from a cultural standpoint, we treat people like adults here. So if they have an issue that they need to take care of at home, they're perfectly able to go and take care of it. We don't punch clocks here. We don't work 60-hour weeks here. We try to get our work done during the work day and allow people to be the human beings that they were born to be. So, and every office that I've ever worked in or have witnessed, those cultures, every office culture is different.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say most of the offices in this town are pretty good. I know a lot of my friends out there, the KGAs and the TSKs and the KZ Galatis, and they're all pretty good people. I think we architects here in Vegas, we're all brothers and sisters in this profession that we love. The Institute holds us together. That's kind of our tying common denominator. We get together and meet, talk about how we run our businesses and how can we make them better. We learn from each other. We don't need some government entity telling us how to do it. We just do it because it's the right thing to do. Okay, and we do it not for us. We do it for our employees and the profession and the people we serve. Because ultimately, we're not the boss. Our clients are, right? And the public we serve. So to me, if you keep that in mind, and that's your basis for making decisions going forward, you're going to be fine.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thank you, Ed. This will be our final question. It's coming from Chris Lovett. Chris, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Ed. Chris with Revolution Engineering. I wanted to ask you.
Chris, you're going to have to turn that up a little bit. Turn your volume up, or I can't hear you.
As your business grows, and is that a little better?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. As your business kind of grows and improves, how are you finding good talent out there and bringing on new employees? I mean, what are you using, or to recruit new talent? Are you find it challenging to find new talent?
That's a great question. I got to tell you, I get that question all the time. And as of late, I get resumes every day. So I'm not recruiting actively. The resumes are just coming in. I think if you run your practice well, I think people hear about you. The word of mouth is probably as strong as ever. And if you have a good practice and you've got a great place to work, people talk about that. And it gets out there. So people, I get calls all the time saying they're not asking for the salary. It's like, we just heard you're kind of fun to work for. And they send you a resume. So we're not building widgets. So you're not on some assembly line and I'm just putting a butt in a chair. It's a completely different animal. I swear it just, for me, I think folks come in and it really is a chemistry thing. When you meet somebody and they meet you and you start chatting and talking about values, shared values, what's important to you, where do you want to go, how do you feel about the environment, the profession, the institute, all of those things, all of a sudden the relationship just blooms. And so we interview a lot of people. Sometimes I don't hire them. Sometimes I don't have the room, but I still chat with them. I want to know about as many good folks out there as possible, because you never know. And as I tell a lot of people that apply, let's stay in touch. You never know. Timing is everything. because tomorrow I could get a call, and I'm always chasing work. And I could get that call. It's like, you know what, that project in Arkansas just came in. Holy crap, now what do we do, right? And so and I don't hire up for a project that I don't have. If I get the project, then I figure out how to take care of that, right? And then I bring on the staff necessary, the resources, the computers, and all of those kinds of other things. But you've got to have the work. This is not a hobby. This is a business. And I keep telling that to all of the young folks that I talk to in the YF that I've been involved with over the years. This is a business. And one of the things that I've always kind of preached a little bit relative to my colleagues and friends in the academy is we need to do a little better job in the academy teaching pro practice. Because I swear, when I got out of school, I didn't know a damn thing. I could barely zip up. There's no way I could have even after I got my license, there's no way I could have opened up an office. I didn't know anything about running business. Couldn't read a balance sheet. I had no idea how business worked. I couldn't have that conversation with a client to understand where they're coming from so I can better make my decisions to give him the built environment that he needs to be successful. All that stuff happens in the private sector, in the work environment, and that's what we call it, internship. And that internship is not 3 years, not in this business. It takes 10 just before you start getting your feet wet. And so I know a lot of people are impatient, especially the young people. I get my license, I know exactly what I'm doing. No, you don't. There is so much to learn in this business. I have been at it for 40 years. I'm still learning things today. So that's why we call it a practice. We're always practicing. All right. And that goes for engineers as well, right, Chris? Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I agree with you, Ed, in the sense that we don't get that kind of training for owning a business. We get great training as far as engineers and architects in the design aspect,
Right.
but nothing on the business side.
The academy teaches us to be problem solvers at best. Okay. But, there's the other half of this thing. And again, the thing about architects is we have to be scientists and artists at the same time. And unfortunately, the academy really works on teaching us to be the artists, but they don't teach us to be the scientists so much, or the business side of it. I mean, that's a science by its very nature. You need to understand how business works, and that's a science. It really is. Even though some of my developer friends think of it as an art. And you know what? There's art in everything.
There is.
But we have to learn all of that. And that's what makes you a better architect, by the way.
What a great coffee with the architect. Ed, I wanted to say that interesting. You're talking in that last section about interviewing, and Chris's question was really about how do you attract and retain talent. Mm-hmm. The one word that comes to mind in all this is fit. It's got to be a good fit, right? And if it's a good fit, then some of the questions, Mahesh, that you had in regards to, where do you draw the line and stuff, you almost mitigate that in its completeness, because if the fit's there, the fit is the fit, right? There's going to be this kind of synergistic relationship between the value system that the organization has and the personal value system that the employer and the employee has. And if they're all in alignment, then the common goal will be met. But if they're not in alignment, then the fit is really what was off. At least that's my take on it. With that, I'd like to thank you, Ed, very, very much. As usual, we gave 30 minutes and you took 45. I appreciate I appreciate the fact that when we don't have a script, we really don't have anything. Oh. I loved it. Great presentation from our guests and in the audience. Great questions. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question and you want to, I'm sure Ed's
call me. I'm in the book.
Take it offline. So thank you for everyone for attending. Stay safe, stay well. We'll see you next month as Jim Lord, CEO of KGA Architect, is going to be our guest architect. So come on back then and we'll listen to the great wisdom that is Mr. Jim Lord. Ed, with that, thank you, sir, very, very much. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you guys. Nicely done, Ed and Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Nice.